In 1949 and again in 1967, Captain Abte wrote accounts of his wartime service, the first book entitled La guerre secrète de Josephine Baker, and the second, Deuxième bureau contre Abwehr, which is co-authored with an Abwehr, a German military intelligence veteran of the Second World War. In the latter volume, Abte writes of how the rules concerning French intelligence work require that any files concerning those operations are closed to the public for several decades at the very least. Indeed, some of the most important Second World War era files concerning Captain Abte and Josephine Baker's wartime service were only released to the public in 2020, more than 75 years after the events they pertain to. As a point of note, the French government and the French security services should be applauded in deciding that files concerning the activities of their intelligence agencies can be released after an appropriate time has elapsed. As far as I am aware, there are no such laws or practices concerning the equivalent British agencies, and few, if any, files, no matter their vintage, are ever released to the public. I also believe that the concept of plausible deniability has been applied to some, if not all, of the above accounts, as any number of the activities described therein, or indeed deliberately left out of some of the accounts, were on the very cusp of what is legal and sanctioned and acceptable, at least outside of times of war. Needless to say, the war and the long and savage occupation of France pitted French men and French women against each other, and loyalties were often conflicted and opaque. The history of much of this remains sensitive, and often accounts were written with a view to not upsetting the status quo, or to avoid attracting opprobrium to the protagonists. Stories concerning French collaboration with the Nazis during the occupation remain particularly sensitive. The rights and wrongs are still hotly debated, and for many, this remains a sensitive subject. Then there are the intricacies and layers of secrecy which attach to the wartime operations of special agents themselves. Rarely in reports submitted to military and political leaders are the sources of the intelligence made clear, only the reliability of those sources. I elaborate upon this further in the main body of this book. Moreover, during the Second World War, agents of different Allied nations had a vested interest in claiming ownership of key, war-winning intelligence as delivered to their taskmasters, regardless of its true genesis. As just one example, the 12 Apostles, the American vice-consuls who were dispatched to French North Africa to spy on behalf of US President Roosevelt, hoovered up intelligence from a vast array of largely non-American sources and took the lion's share of the credit for having secured it. Josephine Baker was by then a French national, as were many of her special agent colleagues. The Polish spy master codenamed Rigor was another key source for the Apostles. As one final layer of intrigue, there is also a supposedly fictional account that deals in some depth with Josephine Baker and Jack Abte's wartime service, but which is, by the author's own admission, actually a true story in which he has had to disguise some names, dates, and minor details. That extraordinary tale, written by the Austrian author Johannes Mario Simmel, and called in English It Can't Always Be Caviar, tells the wartime story of Hans Mussig, a German national, although Simmel uses the pseudonym Thomas Lieven for Mussig in the book. Mussig, a fervent anti-Nazi, was a most unusual character. He was also something of a French intelligence agent, and he proved a very useful and dynamic colleague for Jack Abte and Josephine Baker, one who refused to be hamstrung by either tradition or convention.